When the Sega 32X launched at the end of 1994, there weren't many games available for it. Just 3 were there day one, and Sega struggled getting quality software finished up and released for the entire run of the platform. Among the 32X's small library came Tempo in March of 1995, a collaboration between members of Sega and Red Company, a Japanese developer responsible for PC Engine hits like Bonk's Adventure and Lords of Thunder. With Sonic MIA on the device and Knuckles Chaotix still a few months away, this was the only platformer you could play on the 32X at the time of its release. Hell, it ended up being one of the few platformers on the 32X period. But the combination of two powerhouse development teams certainly meant this was going to be something special, right? In this episode, we will take a look at Tempo, find out just how good it was, and if it's something you should pay attention to today. I hope you guys enjoy my review of Tempo for the Sega 32X.
You know what time it is. Yo, homie, peep here. Tempo, check it out, you know, he makes it funky, and he's good to go. When everything bang, catch the groove with New York, LA, and San Francisco.
Tempo's in the house tonight. You know it's gonna move your mind. The groove is out of sight.
The groove is out of sight.
As funky as you wanna be, Tempo's in the house tonight.
Tempo's in the
You know
house.
it's gonna move your mind. The groove is out of
The
sight.
groove is out of
As
sight.
funky as you wanna be.
The story of Tempo takes place on planet Rhythmia. The annual dance contest is underway and the evil King Dirge is trying to steal the trophy for himself. And it's up to our grasshopper hero Tempo and his butterfly gal pal Katie to stop him. There is virtually no in-game mention of any of this story during gameplay. You get no cinematics to set up why things are happening. In fact, if you don't read the instruction manual, you really have no clue what is going on here. A design choice that lent itself more to the 8 and 16-bit eras instead of the new story-heavy games of the 32-bit generation. Once you begin, you have a choice of 3 levels to challenge that can be played in any order. Once those are defeated, you go up a stage and then challenge those levels. Each of these levels are based on a theme. You get to play in some pretty wild environments like a big city, inside a giant monster's gullet, and even circus and jungle inspired areas. Tempo plays like most platformers in that your main weapon against enemies is jumping on their heads. It's not your only weapon, however. Tempo can kick high and low to take out the bad guys, and he has a snap attack that stuns enemies for a few seconds to make them easier to pacify. Double tap left or right and Tempo can run, which also gives him an additional kick attack and allows him to jump further when the need arises. Since Tempo is a grasshopper, you can use his wings to float for long distances and help negotiate those pesky obstacles. There are a fair number of different things to collect as you explore the stages as well. The different music notes can give life and score bonuses, and you have the typical invincibility option scattered about here and there. Headphones make your life bar bigger, and gold coins give you access to bonus games to play for more points. Your partner Katie helps out in some pretty important ways. She joins you when you find a dance icon, and then stays with you as long as you don't take tons of damage. She will attack if you use your snap to stun an enemy, and she will open up locked passages if you find a Katie icon. The stages are designed in such a way that you'll need to look around and take different routes to finish them. Many have teleporters that shoot you around to different places, and there is a fair bit of verticality involved, so you'll be using those wings quite a bit. Enemies have no real AI and just follow patterns, so most of them are just fodder for your vengeance. The stages, however, do end in boss battles that can be challenging, and the 2 continues you get don't last very long. Fortunately, a password system does make things a lot more accessible and keeps the difficulty manageable for most players. Because this was on the 32X, I was expecting a killer visual presentation. When this was released, we were already seeing the likes of Astal and Rayman, so 32-bit 2D graphics had really been elevated already. And for the most part, this is a good-looking platformer. The sprites are large and well animated, and the screen is loaded with bright colors in both the fore and background layers. It was definitely a step up from anything the Genesis was capable of alone. But as much as I want to heap praise on the graphics, I can't help but really be down on the fact that everything is just too busy. The surreal nature of the art didn't bother me, but there is crap flying around in the background on a scale that is extremely distracting. I understand because the game is heavily focused on music, the busy backgrounds make everything seem alive and in step with the soundtrack. But good lord man, nothing in Tempo ever sits still. It's literally the ADHD of gaming. Some stages have it so bad even the foreground layers are moving just as much as the background. It's almost as if the developers sat down and said, let's see how much we can put on screen without slowdown. My hat's off to them because they loaded it up for sure, but this somehow has a hugely negative impact on the overall appeal for me. I would have much rather have had more attention paid to the fine details instead of the sheer volume of everything. Tempo is definitely not ugly, but I feel it should have been so much more than it is. On a positive note, the main sprite of Tempo is gorgeous in action. It came on a 24 megabit cartridge and it's clear a good portion of that went to Tempo's movements around the screen. Another big part of that 24 megabits was definitely the sound and music. Tempo has a heavy focus on speech, and the variety in the soundtrack is impressive. Some of the samples are scratchy and a few of the instruments sound a bit off, but overall the music here fits the visuals and upbeat nature of its design perfectly. Let's have a listen and see if you agree. There's a lot to like about Tempo. The gameplay is easy enough to pick up and play for just about anyone. Whether you're old like me and your reflexes aren't what they used to be, or you want to introduce it to your kids, just about anyone with a passing interest in platformers will enjoy it. The presentation itself is very happy and upbeat, so if you want to get away from the more serious entries in the genre, this is a good one to take on. Many of the stages are large, have multiple sections to explore, and have hidden items all over the place. It'll definitely keep you busy for a while. But for all the appeal that Tempo has, it also has a number of issues that keep it from greatness. I mentioned the overall busy graphics being a distraction, but I also disliked many of the boss encounters. These ugly pre-rendered models just pop up on the screen and are overly large, making the battle difficult almost solely because you have so little room to maneuver. They're animated poorly too, with no real attacks other than simply running into you. This actually makes the fights infuriating at first because they have invincible frames that look no different from what you normally see. These fights eventually become easy with practice, but are never fun. Tempo also has some pretty irritating hit detection issues. Enemies hit you easily in the air even when you clearly kick them first. And speaking of kicks, the kick you have when you duck is almost completely useless. In order to hit anything in front of you, you have to stop, turn, duck, and then kick them. Most stages minimalize the effectiveness of the run kick as well. Because there is precious little in the way of space to actually run and use it, it falls to the back burner more often than not. This leaves Tempo just a couple of useful attacks, none of which are nearly as effective as just simply jumping on the enemy's head. The stun does have its uses against bosses, however, so be sure to use Katie to your advantage. In truth, I look at Tempo from two standpoints. The first, as a 32X game, it's one of the better offerings for sure. It's colorful, it sounds decent, and the gameplay is fun to waste 20 minutes on here and there. It has appeal for sure, but it just does not hold up well as other early 32-bit platformers released before and around the same time. Gex on the 3DO was a vastly superior playing experience, and Astal on the Saturn annihilated it graphically. Rayman came out just a few months later with better graphics and gameplay. It was real easy to look past Tempo and recommend you play something else back then. Platformers were a dime a dozen in the mid-90s, so you had so much choice. But I don't want to shortchange the importance of Tempo to the 32X's library. Outside of this, you had Chaotix, Pitfall the Mayan Adventure, Spider-Man Web of Fire, and that's it. While platformers collectively still made up a huge percentage of the releases at the time, the 32X had only a handful, and among that handful, this was one of the easier to get into. Pitfall was sluggish, Chaotix's rubber band mechanic was weird, and Spider-Man just plain sucked. That means if you have a 32X or are interested in its games, I wholeheartedly advise giving Tempo a try. Outside of that niche interest, however, there are so many platformers on other consoles that play so much better. If you want something two-dimensional that's gorgeous, go play yourself some Astal, Rayman, or Gex. They hold up better, and you don't need to connect two systems together to play them. Red Company and Sega would work together again shortly after this release. The Sakura Wars games would see numerous releases on the Saturn and Dreamcast, which was a popular strategy game series in Japan. Red Company also helmed the follow-up to Tempo on the Saturn in 1998. Super Tempo brought back the character and another high-fidelity adventure. Red Company also licensed out the Tempo IP to Sims to make the Game Gear game Tempo Jr., which landed shortly after the 32X version in 1995. Funnily enough, all three Tempo games had similar issues with gameplay and design. They were all fun, but fell just short of greatness considering the sheer volume of choice in the genre. And that ultimately becomes the legacy of Tempo, a decent game in a sea of excellent choices. There is much here to enjoy, but plenty of other games do almost all of it better. If you are a 32X owner, it most definitely is worth some of your time, particularly if you're interested in playing the better games for the device. Unfortunately for collectors, this one has risen greatly in price over the last few years. A loose card is a $100 investment these days, and God help you if you collect Japanese 32X games. I still recommend you at least try Tempo at some point. It's a strong enough effort to earn it some of your time. Just don't go in expecting Sonic or Mario levels of fun, and you'll be fine. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.